Good afternoon. Am I audible enough? You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
that's great.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, from whichever part of the world you're joining us from. My name is Leonida Odongo from an organization called Ahirirwe Africa, based in Kenya. And today I'll be moderating this session where we're going to be looking at the role of young people in agroecology. And we're going to have different experiences from the African continent. We have three presenters with us. One is Leticia Ahirirwe. She's from Uganda, Mbarara University, specifically, and also a member of the Ankole Youth Forum. And she's an active voice on gender equality, climate action, and youth engagement in Uganda. She's also a member of an incumbent member of the Albanian youth delegates to the United Nations, where she advocates for climate issues and sustainable development. And she's also pursuing a bachelor's degree in agriculture and livelihood. And she's in her third year. We also have Leticia also raises awareness on climate change and the connection with feminism. And according to her, she believes that we cannot have gender equality without climate justice. And of course, she organizes movie nights based on environmental issues, protests, as well as marches and other educational activities. She's also part of Ahirirwe Uganda chapter. We have Mbatiah. Mbatiah is from Kenya. She's a youth advocate. She deals with issues around youth engagement and also sexual and reproductive health. She's going to be talking to us about agroecology and youth. And then you also have Judy Kipkenda. Judy is from an indigenous community in Kenya, in the Rift Valley region of Kenya. She's going to be talking to us about youth and indigenous knowledge. So basically, just to give a highlight is the fact that Africa is the youngest continent in the world, and young people within the continent are adversely affected by the negative impacts of climate change. And also they are adversely affected by issues around food insecurity. And that's why today we're going to be having a conversation that is going to be showcasing the different experiences of young people across Africa, so that other young people can also be able to learn. And our focus is on youth engagement within the agroecology. Agroecology is a science, it's a movement, and it's also a practice. It's anchored on production that aligns to environmental protection. Some of the principles of agroecology include intergenerational knowledge transfer, respect for indigenous knowledge, restoring biodiversity, as well as ensuring soil health. So without further ado, we are going to be hearing from our speakers. The first one is going to be Leticia, because Judy is just about to send us her presentation. Leticia, welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Leonida. Can you hear me?
Yes, please turn on your video.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Leticia Ahirirwe, as already been introduced. I'm from Uganda, and I'm a student at Mbarara University of Science and Technology, pursuing Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, Livelihood, and Farm Production. I'm an active voice for gender equality and climate change. Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm so grateful. And as you're going to explore the repairing the future, youth, biodiversity restoration, and agroecology, I hope shall change our lives as youth and we are going to see different experiences, especially from Africa and Uganda, how the youth are changing, how youth are engaging themselves in climate change adaptation and agriculture as well. Yeah, maybe you can go to the second slide. Okay, we're going to see biodiversity in Africa, how biodiversity is being changed day and night. We are seeing that Africa's rich biodiversity is under duress with ongoing the conservation of nature. Over 6,400 animals and 1,100 plants in Africa are at the risk of extinction. So you're seeing how biodiversity is being changed day and night because of climate change, how animals are dying every day and plants. Even more immediate are the ongoing threats to African biodiversity from nature habitat loss and degradation, especially from agriculture expansion, direct overexploitation of wildlife and fishery species, including from illegal hunting and trade. So we are going to see how fishery species are being exploited because of illegal hunting. We are seeing how the natural habitat is being lost due to impact and degradation. Some are direct, especially from human beings, through carrying out deforestation, degradation, and all that. And the spread of certain non-native invasive species. Due to climate change impact, we have seen invasive species coming out, especially Masenge in Kenya. Yeah, we have seen these species affecting our environment and making the environment unfriendly. Can we get the third slide? Yeah, can we get the third slide? Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. We are going to see how youth and biodiversity loss, how youth are being affected by climate change and how these towns and cities have been affected. That is a picture showing thousands affected by floods in Mali, Cameroon, and Nigeria. We have seen loss of sources of livelihood. For example, the houses are being swept away because of landslides, climate-induced migration, and conflict. For example, in Uganda, we faced a challenge of floods, especially in Mbale, where people lost their lives. We saw animals being washed away. We saw the city being washed away because of floods, and that is a result of climate change. We have seen loss of life, climate-induced conflict. We have seen destruction of infrastructure, especially roads, hospitals, and bridges. For example, in Uganda, 4 bridges were damaged and 4,000 households of approximately 20,000 people were affected. So people do not transport their products to the market because of the destruction of roads. And this has hindered their livelihood, which results into poverty. Then we have seen restricted mobility due to damage of infrastructure. Yeah, people no longer move because of drought situations, because of floods, and they end up losing their lives because they have nothing to put on the table. Yeah, we can go to the 4th slide. Can we go to the 4th slide? Okay, thank you. So we are going to see how youth, climate crisis, and biodiversity loss, some experiences, especially in Kenya, about drought situations, how people have been affected by drought in different areas, especially in Kenya. We have seen 2.7 million are people in crisis phase. People are suffering because of drought. They don't have water. They're suffering from malnutrition. They don't have food. And 4.3 million Kenyans are food insecure. That means they're on a probability of losing their lives because they don't have what to put in the stomach. They don't have food. And this is putting them on the risk. We have seen mob elephant animals dying because of lack of food, especially the pasture has been dried out. They don't have water to drink, and this has led to their loss. Yeah, we have seen 785,000 people in emergency stage. So that means they're in a probability of suffering from hunger, suffering from malnutrition in drought situation. People have suffered from forced migration. People migrate day and night because of climate-induced changes. For example, you might find an area in Kenya, people don't have water, people don't have food, and this forces them to move from their areas to another. We have seen school dropouts. This is all brought up by hunger and flood. People, especially students or young people, they don't have what to put in the stomach. They don't have school fees because their crops are drying up and they have nothing to sell. So it forces them to drop out of the school because of climate change. We have seen early marriages, parents marrying off their daughters due to climate hardships. Yeah, of course, if you're affected by climate, for example, drought, the crops will dry out, water won't be around, won't be available. So it will give hard time these parents to raise their children, and this results to early marriages because they want money and they need to improve on their livelihood. Yeah. So we are going to see how agroecology and climate adaptation connect, and how are youth involved in climate adaptation. Because we have seen climate change impact, we have seen climate change affecting young people, but how can we connect, how can the youth engage themselves in climate adaptation? Yeah, optimization of natural resources. Existing resources are used efficiently, land and water. Yeah, we all need to optimize or utilize very well our land and water because they're the only sources in the natural resources. So if we degrade them, that means we are going to face climate change impact. Then regenerative soil nutrients through nitrogen fixation on soil through planting regimes. For example, we know crops that fix nitrogen in the soil. For example, beans. We have cover crops that control soil erosion. Practicing agroforestry to act as windbreaks, protect soil from soil erosion in order to regenerate soil nutrients, which will enhance production, and this will obviously improve people's livelihood if the production is very high. We are going to see it promotes circular economy by planting different crops and diverse livestock enabled to earn from food production and animal rearing. Animals gain from food production and food production gains from animal. For example, if animals are providing manure, that is cow dung, we are going to fix it in our gardens, and at the end of it all, we are going to see high production. So it is a two-way process, and this will enhance food production. Then it enhances integration in the ecosystem, for example, plants, animals, and obviously it will lead environmental friendly. Then economic viability enables redesigning of economic systems to adapt existing climate and food crises. For example, you need to plan early what you're going to grow, when to grow, you know the best season of growing certain crops. Then you know the management system that you're going to use. water harvesting processes. You know the method of water harvesting processes you're going to use, especially during rainy season. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. Yeah, promotes use of locally available resources. Okay, we are still on adaptation. Agroecology localizes food production, and this enables adaptation. You produce what you can, and what you can at the local level, what is adapted to your local community. We all need to produce what we can instead of forcing what we don't have. So we are seeing how agroecology can help us in food production, and it will obviously help us in adaptation. Employment creation, whereby it provides job opportunities at production level, processing and distribution. We have seen young people being involved in production, especially at the grassroots level, in order to fight unemployment challenges. At the processing level, people are involved in various, people are involved in variation and distribution. Then we have also seen enhancing utilization of local knowledge. People have gotten a broad knowledge on how they can utilize the natural resources, and this has helped them to improve on their livelihood. Then we have also seen it enhances ecosystem services. For example, intercropping helps in nutrient fixation, agroforestry. As we have already seen in the last slide, that ecosystem services, they help us in enhancing production. So in the real course of intercropping, you're fixing legume crops, which will obviously fix nutrients in the soil and to enhance farm production. Yes, we can go in the last slide. Okay, so now we are going to see the role. Can we get another slide? Okay, thank you. We are going to see how youth have been engaged in biodiversity and restoration and agroecology. Youth, but as you all know that youth represent a biggest percentage in Africa, so they have engaged themselves in biodiversity restoration because they have seen challenges that are being brought up by climate change. So they have stood up and corrected these mistakes by engaging themselves in biodiversity restoration. In the first place, we are seeing a tree planting in campus and off campus. Those are some of the students in organization where they were participating in tree planting, grass planting in order to combat all impacts of climate change. Then we have also seen youth engaged in unpacking Paris Agreement dialogue. We have also seen youth organizing dialogues on climate change, all for experience sharing and across learning. Through all these dialogues, youth have gained knowledge in combating climate change impacts and improving on the restoration of diversity through having knowledge from different personnel, especially from different countries, having conversations, and this has broadened their knowledge in improving climate change. Yeah, we can go to another slide. Another slide. Okay, thank you. As the youth, the first slide. Can we go back the next slide? Can you okay. Okay, thank you very much. We are going to see how we can what should be done in future in order to combat climate change impacts and restoring our diversity. How can we protect our diversity in 20 years to come? How do we want our environment to be? What should be done? So these are some of the things that I thought we should do in order to improve our environment and our biodiversity. Enhance youth engagement in food production. Because as you all know that youth have a poor mentality about agriculture. Yeah, they see it as a dirty game, but we should enhance youth engagement in food production by making agriculture so attractive, so that these guys can also be attracted to be engaged in different enterprises, setting up urban farming, especially the town dwellers, so that they can also know the impact of food production and we prevent food insecurity. Then deliberate campaigns change youth attitude towards agriculture. We have to make campaigns, dialogue, so that we engage these youth into agriculture. They don't see it as a dirty game, but instead they see it as a good job, because we are fighting youth unemployment. So through engaging them in agriculture and bringing up these campaigns about different projects, it can help them improve their livelihood and avoid unemployment opportunities. Instead of them being job seekers, they can be job makers. Then nurturing young people in schools, agroecology. Yeah, as these young people are carrying out education, we need to engage them in agroecology, maybe setting up like programs about climate change and biodiversity, so that by the time they finish their school, they know what agroecology is, they know how to change the environment, they know how to protect the environment, they know how to control climate change impact. Then lobby for curriculum reforms to adapt agroecology training in learning institutions. We request that the institution should, in their curriculum, they should put agroecology training courses, so that these people can know more about the environment and agroecology as well. Then we see how we can improve our environment. Then building movement for youth in agroecology. We need to set up organizations that will actually help youth to know more about climate change, know more about diversity, to know more about different things concerning environment. Then promote intergenerational knowledge transfer space for youth and the elderly. We also need to develop partners, fund youth-focused organizations promoting agroecology. We need to engage youth with different partners, because these youth have organizations. For example, Youth in Climate Change. There is an organization in Uganda called Youth in Climate Change Uganda. But if those guys are empowered by finances, they can obviously do a good job, because they lack people to support them. That's why they lag behind and fail to do environmental work. We can go to the next slide. Okay. Then what should be done by the Catholic Church? It is also an addition. support water harvesting programs and skills transfer, especially in rural areas. Yeah, by encouraging people to harvest water, especially to avoid water problems in drought situations. So if we can tell people how to collect water, especially in scarce situations, it can help us through drought situations. Train farmers on agroecology practices. Train people, we have to engage these farmers because they are the producers. We have to tell them the practices that should be done. Then influence congruence on what they consume. Campaign on healthy food and health eating. Improve our livelihood or improve our health. We need to carry out a campaign on healthy food. People no longer eat healthy food. They eat whatever they come on whatever comes on their way. But if we can carry a campaign, we go to door telling people that this is the best food to eat because junky food and which are not healthy, especially the youth. So if we can tell people that we're good nature, we should eat this type of food, I think we can improve our livelihood. Then push for more budget allocations, smallholder farmers initiative. People at grassroots level, especially the smallholder farmers, they do not have the capacity to buy different machines. So if we can create initiatives and support them, especially financially, it can work
Leticia,
out.
could you
Then,
start winding up? You have 1 minute. Could you wind up,
right.
please?
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Can we get the next slide? Okay, we are visualizing the future. What should be done? We organize farm field schools, especially in schools. We need to engage these farmers in different fields so that they can know different techniques. Promote community-oriented sustainable food production systems. We need to involve in school and out of school youth in agroecology. I've already explained this. We can go to the next slide as I sum up. Okay, I think it's the last slide. Yeah, thank you very much for listening. And I remain Leticia Ahirirwe from Uganda, and I'm so glad that you watched my presentation, and I will be waiting for the feedback and the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Leticia, for sharing the situation of young people and biodiversity loss, as well as what can be done. And of course, bringing out that we can also use religion as a platform to advance agroecology, especially working with religious institutions, for example, the Catholic Church, among others. Next, I'd like to call upon Mbatiah, because Judy is saying she's having some issues with her presentation. So we'll call upon Mbatiah to share with us about young people and agroecology. I already shared about who Mbatiah is. She's a student from the University of Nairobi, undertaking law, and she's going to be talking to us about young people and agroecology. Welcome, Mbatiah.
Thank you, Leonida, for the brief introduction. Yes, I'm Mbatiah. I'm a law student at the University of Nairobi, an advocate for sexual and reproductive health rights of the youth and adolescents, also a proud participant in agroecological practices. So as we wait for my slides to pop up, basically, the essence of our discussion is around youth and agroecology, and we go by the tag promoting fair and human food systems in Africa. Just to clarify, agroecology is at the center of all the SDG goals that we aim to achieve globally, be it poverty reduction, zero hunger, peace, life on the land, responsible consumption and production, gender equality, name it. Agroecology is at the center of it. It influences the food systems in terms of production, processing, and the social and economic participation of people in Africa and globally. So to proceed, we have a highlight of the impact of climate change in African countries, most especially Kenya. The hunger, the drought crisis, especially experienced in the northern parts of our country, have been very catastrophic. We've seen they're the center of loss of livelihoods, loss of livestock, loss of family connections. They also are the center of conflicts, especially in parts like Baringo, where people are fighting for resources such as pasture, which leads to cattle rustling, banditry acts. So a brief analysis of the situation in Kenya and Africa. There's a rise in cases of obesity. This is from the consumption of poor nutrition of value foods, laced with chemicals such as pesticides, most especially the highly hazardous pesticides, which are very rampant in African market, especially in Kenya. The other issue is push for carbon markets, which is especially enabled by the Kyoto Protocol, and it has catastrophic effects in our continent. We have deforestation, which is pushed by encroachment of humans and livestock in search for pastures and also food, especially in times of drought. Then there's the soaring hunger, the non-communicable diseases are on the rise. We also have a hike in the spread of vector-borne diseases like malaria due to the climate crisis and creating a very terrible ground which promotes the growth of such vectors like mosquitoes. We have the rising malnutrition resulting from the low nutrition of value foods produced. We also experience criminalization of seed saving through the laws and policies in countries like Senegal, Zambia, Ethiopia, and Uganda. This is done through IPL laws, which aim to constrict seed harvesting, seed exchange. The other issue is also partnerships between governments and international corporates to dilapidate this or inhibit agricultural practices of the indigenous people. Other issues include inability to access resources and farm inputs due to coercion by field farmers, field officers, especially in states like Ethiopia and Uganda. Then you have technical fixes on food systems. This is is mostly facilitated through capital philanthropists, especially the techno billionaires who fund the GMO systems in Africa. And the center of it is to enable to create a market for chemicals produced in European Union, especially in Africa, where only 3% of the land is occupied by GMO systems. So there's in Africa. Then climate change related pests such as fall armyworm, desert locusts, which cause devastating effects in Africa, especially in Kenya, by affecting plants such as maize crops, leading to poor production, hence the devastating food insecurity issues experienced in the recent past years. Then you have disappearing seed varieties. This is mostly influenced by the techno fixes and the government collaborations with capitalistic philanthropist systems where farmers get hooked by free seed and farm inputs, especially in Zambia and Botswana and Zimbabwe. And the repercussion of that is once they get hooked, they don't bother to keep seed varieties or keep seed reserves for themselves, and inevitably the high with as time goes by, they only come to discover that we no longer have food reserves, seed reserves, and we have to continually go back to the shops, purchase these farm inputs, especially the seeds, the fertilizers, because these seeds are the non-organic seeds are more reliant. They need facilitation for their growth from chemicals such as fertilizers, pesticides, and such. Then you have technical fixes, still on the same issue of biotech, GMOs, genetic transplants, and such. We can continue to the next slide. Climate and food crisis in Africa. Why should we be concerned, especially the youth? Remember that the population of Africa is comprised by 40%. The population in Africa, 40% of it is comprised by the youth, which means we are the center of transition from the old indigenous practices and the people very well experienced in such, and now to the next generation, who is the interlink? It can only be the youth. So why should we be concerned? The rising sea levels, displacements, which are occasioned by the rising temperature levels, meaning that the amount of water retention is very high, and when it's released, it's catastrophic. We have very floods that become catastrophic, experienced in areas like Lake Baringo, Mozambique, River Nzoia, and other and such like areas. Then you have resource conflicts, especially in Kenya, where Baringo and Laikipia areas, there's a lot of conflict on the pasture, which is a result of inadequacy of pastures for the livestock, the shortage of food supply, and such. The other issue is earth tremors in the Rift Valley. There's also crop failures and food insecurity, especially in Botswana, which experienced a very devastating situation of seeds being phased out by the incoming of GMO seeds, which means fields are now empty, in short, because there are no longer seeds to grow. The other area that's been that affected is Zimbabwe, where the phasing out of maize plants or the maize seed reserves by the GMOs has resulted in reliance on the GMO type of maize plant, which as per the communities there, the indigenous seed plantation could give rise to maybe 2 to 3 maize cobs per plant, but the new variant can only give type to 1 maize cob. And the other thing is very dependent on water supply, and Zimbabwe is not, the rainfall patterns in Zimbabwe cannot facilitate such. Then the other issue is prolonged drought and hunger. We've seen that in Kenya, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. The rising temperature, extreme weather prevents patterns and land degradation. In the parts of Lesotho and Rift Valley in Kenya, we have flash floods, which have been very at the center of the displacements experienced in Zimbabwe, which also leads to other socioeconomic crises, shortage of that is unavailability, or the sustainable economic practices are cut off, displacement of families. Then there is the increased temperature, extreme weather events such as resulting in extreme weather events such as flash floods, cyclones in Zimbabwe, so Swaziland and Mozambique. Then you have vector-borne diseases, as I explained earlier, the likes of malaria, which are the breeding of mosquitoes is very enabled when there's the increase in water sources or water water pools. Then there is declining air quality due to increasing air temperatures. Then there is rising hunger. Approximately 281.6 million people are malnourished and 264 people in Africa only. That is just the statistic that we have. That between in the year 2020, we can imagine the figures that we may anticipate from 2022. Then you have socioeconomic impacts, which you highlighted. There's displacement, loss of lives, forced environmental migration, early marriages, occasioned by families in need of food, so they have to sell off their children at a young age, which is also catastrophic to their reproductive and growth. Then you have the effect of on their physical and well-being of the youth, the women, and also the elderly, especially lung diseases, infectious diseases rising from malnutrition. And you also have exposure to insecurities, such as banditry and abduction, practices which are rampant in such communities, which are experiencing scarcity in resource, distribution of disruption of education and economic activities due to my forced migration resulting from environmental hazards such as droughts, then the rise in poverty levels due to debts accrued from purchasing farm inputs. This is this is highlighted especially in Ethiopian and Ugandan situations where the government, through the field workers, they coerce the farmers to purchase farm inputs and also restrict indigenous seed harvesting and planting. We also have Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in Africa. What are the reports? They've observed and projected increase in aridity, agricultural and ecological droughts resulting from the climate change, and the poor practices, or rather the limitation of practicing agroecology farming, because agroecology seeds are more sustainable, they are drought resistant, pest resistant, they're economically efficient. It's only that it only needs a little of facilitation to make it sustainable. Unlike the other variants that you're experiencing, it's heavily dependent on chemicals. It's hardly sustainable. The gene termination factor makes the production and reservation of seeds impossible. Then you have increased speed winds resulting into cyclones, suffered in areas like Zimbabwe and Mozambique, as explained earlier. Then you have lack of recovery funding for the cyclone survivors. People are still living in resettlement sites, as seen in the photo provided, which also breeds other social and economic insecurities when people are crowded in such settlement areas. The education, the economic activities, physical security of the people around there, and such. Then we have Cyclone Kenneth in Zimbabwe, which resulted in, yeah, that's still the same point. The people displaced by that cyclone are 670,000 people. It's that's a great population, factoring the economic inputs into the economy of Zimbabwe. There's a lot that is lying stagnant, and the repercussions overflow. Global warming reduces Africa's overall food production capacity by 10 to 20% annually. Then the decrease in snow glaciers results in the rise in sea levels, which puts the marine species life at risk. And Africa is one of the countries that is also dependent on fishing and marine economy to develop its economy. On to the next slide. At the center of the ecological issues experienced in Africa are the techno fixes in the food system and for solution to climate crisis, dubbed as measures to alleviate hunger and poverty in Africa. How is this facilitated? It's anchored on profits, guised as gifts or assistance to Africa by the philanthropic capitalists and who happen to be the tech billionaires. And one of such entities is the Bill and Melinda Gates. It is it is encroaching Africa at a very fast rate through GMOs. The most evident scenario is the Ugandan crossbreed maize, hybrid maize. And in Cote d'Ivoire, there's also a system to, there's also an ongoing GMO excursion, or rather research to find to treat a cassava, some variety of African cassava, in the name of making it immune to diseases, immune to pests and such, since it is the most resilient and staple food in most of the African countries. Then there is also what they do, producing what we do not consume through contractual farming. Find there's a lot of focus in horticultural practices, which are mostly experiences done in the greenhouses, and you find that these hardly it's barely for domestic consumption, but rather for commercial purposes, and that leaves us at a dependent position. You need to sell this produce for you to purchase domestic food. It beats logic. You can't sustain yourself. You're always dependent on this chain of selling to purchase. Then there's intensified chemical use for the benefit of multinational corporations like Monsanto. This has been, especially Monsanto has been pointed out as the cause of maize freeze in Zimbabwe, where it's poison, or rather pesticides, which are highly hazardous, end up. And just a brief analysis of the Atlas Foundation finding, it indicates that a total volume of 3,000 tons of pesticides is sold in the Kenyan market, 44% of which is banned in the EU market. And the usage of highly hazardous pesticides by Kenyan farmers is presently above 76%. Remember that EU is the the most vibrant and lucrative market for Kenyan agricultural produce, and such. And there's also these coercion to use such pesticides for these agricultural inputs to be these agricultural produces to be acceptable in such markets. It beats logic in the manner that EU has ratified an agreement, or rather a convention banning use and sale of highly hazardous pesticides, but it's still at the center of it all. Then the increased monoculture. This is aided by such gene terminating seeds in such in a manner that you only have to capitalize on planting one type of variety, and it leaves farmers dependent on it. It takes away the innovativeness, or rather the mixed farming practices that African farmers, indigenous farmers are used to practicing, such as intercropping and other pesticide measures. Yes?
But could you start winding up, please, so that we give Judy a chance and also get questions from the audience? Thank you.
Sure. Then you have corporate capture of our food systems by degrading indigenous food prone to drought, pests, and diseases. such is the case of the maize variant in Zimbabwe. Then Africa is now a market frontier for the banned agricultural chemicals in other continents, especially EU, as highlighted above. The information technology keeps us, there's a lot of manipulation of the intellectual property rights of the indigenous farmers, the data collected without their knowledge and such. So in a nutshell, that is the center of engagement of the youth in ecological practices, being the link and the transition platform for sustainable, humane, and fair farming practices that are going to be sustainable in the long term. Thank you, Leonida. I'm done with my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Mbatiah, for the input and also for bringing in the connection or the role of young people. Now we'll have Judy join us to share about the indigenous people's experience, and then we'll have just a few minutes for a round of questions or clarifications that are coming from the audience. Thank you. Judy, over to you, please. Judy, you can go ahead. I've asked her to unmute. Judy, can you hear us? Kindly unmute. Yeah, as hello everyone, as Judy is trying to rejoin, perhaps if there are questions from the audience that the two speakers could respond to, then that would be great. Any questions, clarifications from the two presenters could respond to? We invite questions from the audience. There's a question. There's a question from Helen that is asking, and this is going to Mbatiah. How could you expound on the point of how carbon markets are catastrophic to Africa? And we also have We also have the question to Leticia. What do you instill to do? What do you do to instill the interest, participation, and maintaining participation for young people? So we can start with Mbatiah. How is carbon market dangerous for the African continent? Over to you, Mbatiah. Thank you.
Okay, so with regards to carbon marketing, there are various strategies implemented to facilitate it. And one of them is the greenhouse system. And there's a capping to the carbon levels permissible. And in such manner, the allowances as incentives to meeting that cap. So inevitably, while it is a solution geared towards combating climate crisis resulting from the rampant increase in the CO2 levels in the atmosphere, that allowance acts as an incentive, which inevitably, given the dynamics of our system, many of the people we expect more of the states to embrace that, which is catastrophic in the long term. Which means most of the we are going to raise the carbon levels, especially within our region. So far, Africa is faring well because we are not super industrialized like other states in the Asia and the Western regions. But with that incentive, and as we've also seen, the likes of the manner in which philanthropic capitalists have been able to penetrate countries like Cote d'Ivoire. It's infusing money into the economy of a state. For instance, the 15 million US dollars donated towards the Cote d'Ivoire cassava GMO exploitation. It's still the same thing that is used to woo African countries, especially through their leaders, to ratify such acts. And the consequences, they may not be visible at the moment, but in the long term, we're going to jeopardize our ecosystem. And at the center of it, there's the land, the life on land, and the life in the water. Both are going to be affected. I suppose I've answered that question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mbatiah, for your contribution. And of course, you also need to say that what happens when these trees that are being planted die? Isn't the carbon still released back into the environment? And then another thing is the fact that who determines the prices? You know, you'll find that they tell us that you're going to get money, but in reality, you find that the person who's growing these trees does not get a lot of money as is being pushed. And so I'd like to invite our audience. We're just about to end this, but I'd like to invite the audience to join us, continue being with us in the Zoom so that we can respond to the emerging questions, but also be able to listen to what Judy has for us. Thank you so much. And to our audience who've been with us so far, we really appreciate your presence. And of course, the live stream is going to be shared on ORFC website. You're going to be able to access that. You can also share with your friends, with your networks about this as it happens, and continue tweeting and retweeting about this conversation because it's very, very important for the world and for Africa. Over to you, Judy, if you're there, so that we can continue with this. Looks like Judy is not there. So perhaps if there are other questions from the rest of the audience, perhaps it can be responded. Leticia, you can respond to your question. How do you sustain young people's engagement, especially in on issues of agroecology, on issues of addressing climate change? How do you make young people become hooked or become interested in this process? Over to you, Leticia.
Oh, thank you very much, Leonida, for that question from the audience. How we can keep people interested in climate change and agroecology. One, what I have learned about you is that they have good ideas, but the problem is that their ideas are not always heard and implemented. So if these ideas can be heard, and at the end of it all, there is a change that is being done by these youth, I think it can work out, and they'll keep being interested in promoting climate change and promoting the environment as well. Because especially in Uganda, these guys, like the young people, they have good ideas, but because these old people don't get their ideas very well, like they are looked as marginalized groups. So you find it giving them a hard time to be interested in these organizations or in these initiatives. Secondly, they need to allow young people to be engaged in policy making, especially when these guys are making policies. They don't engage young people in these policies. But if they allow these people to also take part, they also contribute, it can also make these people feel at peace and be interested in different climate change initiatives. And giving them chances or opportunities to participate in different conversations. For example, dialogue, like participating in Oxford Real Farming Conference. Like right now, I'm interested. Like I'm getting interested because of this conference. It has boosted my morale. So that means I will keep being interested in different climate change initiatives and agroecology. Lastly, is supporting these young people, especially financially, or giving them knowledge, because you find it hard that people at the grassroots level, they have ideas, but because they lack someone to push them on, they lack someone to push them or finance them or support them in their different projects, you find it very hard for them to push themselves. But if they are supported, they can have interest in these projects and groups. Yeah, thank you. I think I have answered to some of the questions. Yeah,
And
thank you, Leonida.
just to interrupt, we're going to stop the live stream now. So why don't we give it about 30 seconds and let people join? So if we can just pause, I'm just going to wait for a good stopping point on the Crowdcast live stream, and then I'll admit anyone that joins. Right now, it's just a couple people though.
Okay. Thank you, Judy, for being able to join. So we'll continue with the conversation. We're talking about the young people engagement in agroecology, and we've so far had a conversation looking at youth and agroecology. We've also had a discussion around youth and biodiversity, and what young people showcase, what young people are doing in different spaces across Africa. Specifically, we're looking at Kenya and Uganda, but of course, these are, when you talk about young people, Africa is